World of Warfare presents A Bloody November for the 15th Air Force. Early winter weather over Europe remained wretched in November of 1944, forcing a good number of mission cancellations, plus an increasing reliance on H-2X radar-guided bombing techniques. While the 8th Air Force allocated 2 Mickey ships, as they were called, to each Liberator group, in November, 15th Air Force Commanding Officer Nathan Twining implemented an all-or-nothing strategy that upped the number of Pathfinder libs to 4 per bomb group. Mickey ship missions were designated Red Force, while visual bombing missions were designated Blue Force. By war's end, the 15th's accuracy for Red Force missions proved to be twice as effective as their RAF counterparts, recording an average miss distance of 2 miles, compared to the RAF's 4-mile average miss distance, prompting one 15th officer to jokingly note that 15th Pathfinder crews were doing twice as well or half as poor as their RAF counterparts. On November 16th, John Voll took off in his Mustang, American Beauty, escorting a stream of big friends on a bombing raid over Munich. Already at triple ace with the 32nd Fighter Group, he was tied at 17 kills apiece with fellow triple ace Sully Varnell. Both pilots stood one victory behind the 325th's all-time ace, Herky Green, who had recently been reassigned to desk jockey duty as a member of Twining's operational staff. Turning back from Munich due to a radio malfunction, Voll was about 10 miles southeast of Aviano when he crossed paths with a lone Ju-88 bomber, which was no match for the faster, nimbler Mustang. But before the bomber went down, the pilot most assuredly radioed for fighter support, and as Voll climbed back to altitude, a mixed flight of Me-109s and FW-190s bounced him from above. The Germans outnumbered Voll 12-1, but thanks to his quick reflexes and calm focus under fire, he scored hits on 8 enemy aircraft before they retreated for safer skies. Once he had flown home to his San Severo Air Base, Voll threw up on the wing of American Beauty, overcome by relief and delayed anxiety caused by a gut-wrenching near-death fight. After sliding off the wing, he dropped to the ground on his hands and knees, working through wave after wave of dry heaves. Voll was credited with 4 kills, 2 probables, and 2 damaged on the day, flying his final missions in December before rotating stateside. He remained the top ace of aces in the MTO, with 21 victories to his credit. After half his stateside crew members were killed during a training mission in the Caribbean, nose gunner Jim Mund was sent to the 15th as part of a fill-in crew for the 460th Bomb Group, based in Spinazzola, Italy. During a September 13th raid on Polish oil and rubber plants near Oświęcim, Poland, their ship lost an engine, forcing the bomber to fall out of formation as the crew limped for home. Just short of the Italian coastline, the ship ran out of gas, obliging the crew to bail out over the Adriatic. 3 men drowned, while Mund and his surviving crewmates were rescued by Italian fishing boats from nearby Viesta. After Mund's safe return to Spinazzola, on November 18th, he flew again on a raid to the Campofamido airdrome near Udine, Italy. While mission planners classified the raid as a milk run, anti-aircraft fire was intense and accurate, knocking out Mund's Liberator at bombs away. After bailing out over Yugoslavia, Mund and 3 other surviving crew members started walking south toward the Yugoslavian coast until they ran into some partisans who informed the downed flyers that 2 of their crewmates were dead, while 4 more were captured by the Germans. Known as the Blister Club by World War II airmen, Mund and his party spent nearly a month walking across Yugoslavia with an assortment of partisan relay teams, finally arriving in Zadar, Croatia, along the coast, where they were handed over to the British Royal Navy and returned to their Italian base. I spent a couple of days in the hospital in Foggia, Mund recalled, then went back to the 460th Bomb Group. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, the CQ, or Charge of Quarters, woke me up for a mission. I was sharing a Tufty block hut on campus with some ground crew personnel who had adopted me, since I was the only non-commissioned officer left over from my crew and had no tent anymore. So I was back on flying status. Near the end of November, we flew one mission where we had to make an emergency landing at a South African Air Force B-26 Marauder base near Pescara, Italy. Munn's experience may have been unique to the war, since he went through 3 airplanes, 2 bailouts under hostile conditions, lost most of his crew, went MIA for over 3 weeks behind enemy lines, and was still sent out to fly again. On a November 20th raid aimed against Nazi oil, 400 heavy bombers attacked Blechhammer, escorted by nearly 300 P-38s and P-51s. Because most were turned back by bad weather, a third of the bomber stream reached the target area, only to be ripped apart by thick, accurate flak. It was our 4th mission, recalled Flight Engineer Tom Rowe of the 461st Bomb Group, and it turned out to be the thing of which nightmares are made. After 4 previous raids on the Blechhammer South synthetic oil refinery, it was the first time that winds had prevented the Germans from obscuring our targets with smoke, Rowe recollected. On the other hand, clear skies gave German anti-aircraft gunners an equal opportunity for targeting the bomber stream. 23 of the 26 planes in our group took flak hits, and we were one of them. We got hit during the bomb run, and the bomb bay doors wouldn't close. Then Francis Deans, our bombardier, yelled, "I've been hit." I was ordered to go down and close the bomb bay doors manually, using a crank, Rowe remembered. On my way down, I looked into the nose of the plane and saw the entire floor covered in red. All I could think of was, geez, poor Deans. The smell of cordite from the German ACAC rounds permeated everything. I wore no parachute as I stood in the bomb bay area, cranking those doors shut. I could see the ground far below and was thinking that I was going to be nothing more than a grease spot, and my family would never know what had become of me. After the bomb bay doors were cranked close, I went into the nose and saw that Rufus Breland, our nose gunner, was hit as well. "Take care of Deans," he said. "He's hit worse." Breland was wrong, but didn't know it yet. He had been hit by something between his eyes that had exited through his mouth. I told Deans that he would have to help, so he used his feet to push himself as I pulled him under his arms. I got Dean out of the nose, and we cut his pants open to see the wound. He had been grazed in the hip, and it was nothing more than a deep scratch. The red liquid all over the floor of the plane's nose was hydraulic fluid. I went back for Breland, and he said to me, "You've been hit. There's blood on your shoe." I cut my pant leg open, and there was a jagged piece of shrapnel sticking out of my right shin. The blood made it too slippery to pull out with my hand, so I took out a pair of pliers from my pocket and used that. After the bomb run, the squadron leader made a wrong turn during the flak attack, and given the lack of visibility, Rowe's pilot, Robert Crinkley, dropped his altitude until the navigator could get a visual bearing on their current location. The reduced altitude gave German gunners another chance to bring down the ship, this time delivering a flak burst into the bomb bay and wing roots. Then tail gunner James Shipman reported that our tail was busted up, Rowe recalled. Our plane was low on fuel and full of holes. We were now over Yugoslavia, and Crinkley told everybody to get their chutes on. He would hold the plane steady while everybody bailed out. One by one, everybody jumped. Ball turret gunner Walter Shorty Wright waved to me before he bailed out, and soon it was just the pilot and me. I tried to jump out but couldn't. I ended up falling out and was turning somersaults mid-air. I was thrilled to be out and didn't hesitate to pull the ripcord. I held onto that ring tightly and didn't let go, even after the chute had opened. After hurting his back slamming into a stone wall, Rowe hid his parachute in some shrubbery, then found Deans hanging from a tree. Once he could free Deans from his harness, Rowe and Deans headed south by southeast, eventually meeting up with radio operator Wilbert Penno and Shorty. The procedure was to travel in pairs, so the four of us would have to split up. Penno could speak German, so I wanted to go with him. Besides, neither Shorty or Deans drank, so I figured they would make a good pair. Working their way south over the next 3 days, Roe and Penno survived by eating their meager supplies provided in their escape kits while melting snow in their canteens to keep themselves hydrated. They eventually ran into a group of approximately 25 Yugoslav partisans who promptly began to hug and kiss our cheeks. Gathered in a farmhouse, one by one, Roe's crewmates were reunited. After dark, they were driven down to Zadar, which was currently held by British commandos. Much to Roe's surprise, when the airmen entered a small church, each man was given a personal introduction to Tito. Tito was wearing a black suit with a white shirt and tie and had 4 aides with him, Roe recalled. He asked, "Did you bomb Berlin?" We were explaining our actual target when the colonel told us that was all the English Tito spoke. After several days in Zadar, an American C-47 Skytrain picked up Roe and his crewmates, flying them back to Bari to complete the remainder of their missions. On the same November 20th mission to Blechhammer South Synthetic Oil Refinery, the photographed fate of Clarence Jack Loker's Liberator would become one of the most iconic images of the air war in Europe. Loker's entire formation box of Liberators, in fact, suffered egregious losses to anti-aircraft fire. During the inbound leg, reconnaissance pilots known as Ricci pilots observed a heavily overcast sky over the target, obliging Loker to turn the 465th bomber stream toward his secondary target. A few minutes later, after the order was given, visibility improved over Blechhammer South, forcing the bomber stream to make a 270-degree turn back for their primary target. Due to heavy incoming flak, Loker, as commander of the 781st Bomber Squadron, raised his flight's altitude from 22,000 to 23,000 feet in an effort to throw off the aim of enemy gunners on the ground. After the altitude change was radioed to the 464th Bomb Group, flying tail-end Charlie behind the 465th, Loker's plane suffered a massive flak burst that sheared off the left wing at its root. The Liberator immediately rolled over and burst into flames. Sitting backwards behind the pilot's seat, radar navigator Joseph Kujer knew the plane was mortally wounded when he glanced through the waist window and saw their wing fly by. He shouted at radar operator Joseph Whalen to bail out, but Whalen was either unconscious or dead, since Kujer saw no reaction in Whalen's eyes. Knowing he had only seconds to survive, Kujer grabbed his parachute in his right hand while jettisoning the bombs with his left, working the emergency release mechanism at the front of the bomb bay. Kujer dove through the open bomb bay at 20,000 feet, clipping on his parachute as he fell. Once he landed, he was convinced he was the only one to make it out of the fiery explosion of his doomed ship. Loker knew his airplane was finished, and he immediately bailed out through the top hatch. Top turret gunner Jack Rabkin had just removed his flak suit prior to bailout, but when the plane began its downward plunge, his efforts to exit the plane were thwarted by the centrifugal force of the spin, pinning him against the fuselage wall. Rabkin perished in the fiery explosion that followed. Co-pilot Milton Duckworth tried to bail out through one of the waist windows, but was pinned against the fuselage when the plane began its death spiral toward the ground. Fighting his way to the top hatch, Duckworth grabbed the top turret gun barrels and forced his way out into the slipstream. As he was falling, he caught sight of navigator Grosvenor Rice and bombardier Robert Hochman, still trapped in the nose of the falling plane. Moments after Duckworth's flyby, Hochman managed to put on his parachute and exit through the nose wheel bay, while Rice was trapped without his parachute and went down with the plane. In the back of the plane, waist gunner James Bourne, engineer Lee Billings, and radio operator Edmund Miosky struggled to get clear of the falling Liberator. Miosky was last seen standing near the escape hatch with his parachute attached to his harness, but the subsequent explosion most likely threw him away from the hatch, where he became trapped in the ball of flames caused by ruptured fuel tanks. Bourne and Billings, on the other hand, were blown free of the burning lib, landing on the ground with severe injuries and burns. Neither man could remember the moment they were blown from the ship. However, Bourne recalled that he was standing at the waist window trying to get to tail gunner Paul Flynn. Flames impeded his ability to reach his crewmate, and the next thing he recalled, he was pressed up against the top of the fuselage when the plane went into its initial spiral. When the explosion threw him from the plane, the first thing he noticed was tears in his parachute, along with several shroud lines dangling out of his parachute pack. At first, he tried to stuff the chute back into the pack, but he pulled the ripcord instead, remaining conscious as he coasted down to Earth. He broke a leg upon landing, and later a surgeon removed one of his badly burned eyes. Bourne landed in the refinery where his own plane had come to bomb, Blechhammer South, and was captured almost immediately. He spent a month in a Blechhammer hospital before the Russian advance into Poland forced his move to a hospital in Bad Soden, Germany. He spent the remainder of the war in captivity, recovering from his multiple wounds and repeated skin grafts. Flying behind Loker, Joseph Norman's Liberator was forced to fly through the ball of fire created by Loker's exploding plane, collecting the left main landing gear of Loker's plane when the burning wheel and strut crashed through the nose of Norman's plane. 2 crewmen bailed out before Norman could regain control and assure his remaining nervous crew that the bomber was still airworthy. Trailing thick black smoke from 2 wounded engines, Norman made an emergency landing in Russian-held Poland. Loker's right wingman was Ernest Taft, whose bomber was hit soon after Loker went down. Taft's Liberator went into a dive before exploding in midair, and while eyewitnesses in other planes saw no parachutes trail from the plane, Taft and his navigator managed to escape the fiery wreckage. According to Taft, his top turret gunner bailed out without a parachute. Either he forgot to put it on, or he chose to fall to his death rather than die in the fire. During Nazi interrogation after his capture, Taft was told that the rest of his crew had indeed survived the crash, except his top turret gunner, only to be lynched by Polish civilians before the German Wehrmacht could intercede. Taft later reported that the Germans showed him some personal effects belonging to his crew, most of which he recognized on sight. Flying lead in the 2nd Squadron of the 465th Bomb Group was Luby Robinson. Unable to turn his plane after bombs away because flak had cut the flight control cables of his Liberator, the entire squadron followed him through the flak barrage. While crewmates tended to their severely injured ball turret gunner, Robinson's engineer cut steel support cables from the now empty bomb racks, splicing them onto the broken steering cables until the plane could once again be flown. After the repairs were made and tested, Robinson landed his crippled ship back at his Pantanella Air Base. Now that the Luftwaffe had nearly vanished from the skies over Europe, on November 21st, the Checkertails went on a strafing mission with orders to eradicate traffic between 2 key towns in Yugoslavia. During the 45-minute free-for-all, the 325th destroyed 51 trucks, a locomotive, 3 staff cars, 3 ammo trucks, a German jeep, and 12 horse-drawn carts. 49 Wehrmacht soldiers were killed in the attacks, while 23 trucks, 10 flat cars, and 6 additional horse-drawn carts were heavily damaged. 2 Mustangs were lost to the flak during the raids, although both pilots managed to bail out for a safe landing, making November of 1944 a particularly brutal month for the 15th Air Force.